All right, welcome everybody to the June 17th Octant community meeting. We're going to go over kind of a couple things that are landed in master that we've been working on, talk about some of the longer term work that we have been continuing to do, and also re-mention the webinar that we have coming up today. So with that, I'll get started. So we got an issue reported for the Ingress Controller, for an ALB Ingress Controller. This was reported by Billy Shambrook. And Sam took a look at this, and we have come up with a fix for it that we're going to just build in support for this special use of annotations and labels or values within Amazon, so that everything will just kind of function the way it's intended to. And there was a PR up for this that got approved, and then we had some more discussion on it and decided that we wanted to just have first-class support for this item. We were originally thinking about just making it function as is, kind of passing on doing the back-end lookup, and we would implement the object status and config information that comes out of these annotations as a plugin. But right now, the plugin model for that would be, there's not a great place for people to discover plugins, so they wouldn't even know that they need this plugin until they ran into a failure. So we decided to go ahead and just implement this as native support in Octant, and we'll revisit turning this probably back into a plugin later as we make modifications to the plugin system that make that easier to do. And just for a little more information on this issue, this was an issue specific to this this AWS ALB Ingress Controller. There's a special markup that you can do where you use this service name and service port with the use annotation information, and Amazon will then go and use these annotation entries to perform this SSL redirect. So since that service name is not a real service, and Octant attempts to build a resource viewer and look up these services in the backend, this was failing when you attempted to view or load this ingress into any of the resource viewer trees. So this issue will be corrected very soon, thanks to Sam. And the next release will include that. We're not going to do a dot release for the next release. We'll do a full-on release because that's going to include the Storybook updates, some new features with table filtering that I'm about to talk about, and the new CRD overview, cluster overview stuff, which I'm about to talk about as well. So moving on to the table string filter. So this was a PR that came in from Sergui from Belgium. I will learn how to pronounce that name, I promise. This was the ability to add filtering to our data grid columns. So currently there was no filtering. So if you had long lists of things, you would end up with this view that you're seeing here, where you'd have to page through at the bottom or extend the list out and scroll up and down. So this is a free-form string filtering that happens on the front end. It allows you to type in and filter down anything that's in the name column for a given data grid. I believe it's for every column in the data grid. Yeah, every column. So that feature will be in the next release, but it's merged into master now, so it's part of the nightly build, which is a good time to remind folks that if you head over to the Octant main Octant page in our README, you'll find a link to our nightly builds, which is right here. The third new feature that was added, well, I guess the first one was a fix, but also feature bug enhancement. The third item that was added was the cluster overview. We added the actual listing of CRDs in cluster overview. So Brian, this closed out a whole host of issues that we had about not showing CRDs and how updating some of the printer patterns that we're using and moving away from consolidating some of our code that was converting unstructureds to concrete types. We had it kind of peppered throughout the whole project. So this kind of cleaned up a lot of those. And so now the CRDs are listed on the cluster overview page. And I think I have, I think I have a, I have Octant running, but let me see if it has any CRDs in it. I think it does. But let me just have to move it from the browser. I have it onto this browser. So let's go cluster overview. Yeah, so here in the cluster overview, you can see this is the section we're talking about. So now there is the list of CRDs that are currently installed, and you can click through on them and find any find out the information that is available for those the list and all of the information you would expect to find out about a CRD. So that was added by Brian. My build that I'm running right here is the current release build, so it doesn't have, or an old master build, not the current release build. So you can see it doesn't have those filters yet, but they are there. And so that's it for the current list of new features that we've been working on just in this last week. And then I wanted to circle back to some of the items that were brought up in the previous week. So I am still working on the update to our SubjectAccess. There was some internal shifting and moving of things at VMware, which is the company I work for. And so I've been kind of getting acclimated to new group and lots of meetings and things like that. So this work kind of stalled a little bit during late last week and early this week, but I'm picking that back up tomorrow. And to remind folks, the SubjectAccess work is the work that is going into us collecting and building a profile of what you have access to in a cluster at essentially what is login time, or in the case of Octant right now, start time. Those two things are soon to be separated. And this allows us to then navigate you through Octant without the issue of showing you a bunch of things you don't have access to, or us getting a bunch of unauthorized errors from the cluster and trying to retry watches and retry list calls over and over and over. The current method we have does support backing off, but it is something where we're explicitly checking with each request. So we're moving away from that model to a kind of an access cache model or an access lookup model where we will fetch this information periodically from the cluster and update any of the maps for what you have access to. And we'll also be able to allow the user to refresh this and clear it out, but we'll also be able to prompt users when something they previously had access to, they no longer have access to, in the case of configuration files being changed or credentials being expired, things like that. So it opens up a lot of ways that we can now notify the user of kind of what's happening and have a more friendly experience for you as you're navigating through your cluster. You're not going to be clicking on a lot of things that don't work. Moving on to plugins. So the plugin updates are being discussed, and the main goals here, I'm actually going to edit this while we talk, so there's some live notes. The main goals of the plugin updates are to make plugins portable across platforms. Right now, they have to be built for each specific platform that you want to run them on. So that's one of the goals. Another goal is to make them reloadable. Right now, you have to stop and start Octant if a plugin changes, or you want to install the new one, or you want to remove one. We want the ability for them to be reloadable, removable, all of the uables. So anyway, so we and then the third item is that we want them to be able to be easily accessed, like easily find them. So some findable, some sort of catalog, but not necessarily like a service, but just having a well-defined API within Octant that consumes likely a JSON structure that defines where it can go and find plugins. This could be something that is given to Octant at runtime. This could be a URL that's passed in that Octant consumes, you know, in real time. The function of that is not what we're concerned about. It's the ability to consume some JSON structure that tells Octant where it can go and find plugins, whether they are just anywhere. It doesn't matter. That's the main goal. So actually, we'll call this JSON structure to identify plugin locations.
Hey, Dwayne.
Yeah.
So in Knative, I'm looking at implementing something called proof of concept name is a manual, but it's hints for things like OpenShift or GCP or some other UI renderer that gives hints on how to show a CRD in the first class way that it would like. Like if one of the spec values is a slider, then there's hints on, say, like this field is a slider with this range. And right now, most of these companies do this in annotations.
Yep.
But one of the other goals is a way to help discovery of what's available in your cluster. And it kind of occurs to me, I have one point I want to ask about the group thinks around plugins. And then this leads in. So it'd be interesting if the plugin was able to actually like be hosted out of the cluster as some sort of installable add-on. And I don't know what you think about that. But if that was the case, then you could also use the CRD manual thing to discover that something actually does support an Octant plugin. And then you could get kind of a self-discovery mechanism there by observing what's in the cluster and then using the cluster to go and extend the view of Octant potentially.
Yeah, so let me make sure I understand the question correctly. So when you say a plugin hosted out of the cluster as an add-on, you're meaning that there is the API for the plugin is completely remote?
Yeah, that's right. Because right now it's a port localhost, right? And you're pinging back requests and it's streaming like basically render commands to Octant.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like it'd be an interesting model for that streaming to actually happen over any kind of HTTP. It doesn't have to be local. It could actually be in the cluster you're talking to.
Yeah, and I think that'll be possible. So it's not a goal of the redesign of plugins, but one of the things we will be doing when we redesign plugins is moving away from Go plugin and implementing our own gRPC runtime to communicate between Octant and plugins. So since it will just be gRPC, there's nothing to say that it can't be some other thing running somewhere else. We still very much want to support the local model of you upload a plugin and it knows how to talk. But yeah, there's no reason that gRPC couldn't be exposed to things inside the cluster.
Cool. Yeah, I would, let's talk more.
Yep. And so, yeah, so that kind of covers what our current agenda is, our current goals. Sam is also, I just want to give an update. Sam is still working on the unteasing the hard requirement for Octant to need a kubeconfig at startup. This is something that we've been knowing that we wanted to remove for a while, and Sam is currently in the process of working on that code, providing two ways to kind of, one is a direct upload of the kubeconfig, and another is watching for it to be assigned to the variable that Octant looks for, which is the kubeconfig environment variable. So those things are currently being worked on. And all of those still align with some of the higher kind of roadmap items we've talked about in the past with as we progress towards Octant v1. And I'm going to reverse the order of these. So because I I'll mention this and then we'll move on to the demo. There's a CNCF webinar for Octant happening today. I'm going to be leading that. The kind of shape of that webinar is we're going to take a containerized workload and we're going to work through, as I watched someone work through who wasn't very familiar with Kubernetes, kind of install it, get it in Kubernetes, and then use Octant to kind of figure out what was wrong and what's going on and how to fix it. And we're going to fix the whole, from start to finish, we're going to fix everything without ever going out into kubectl. We're going to fix it all right through Octant, which is pretty great. So I encourage folks to, if they are interested or have time, or haven't seen a full end-to-end demo of Octant before, to attend and check it out. It's today at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific time. And with that, I'll hand it over to Milan, who's going to do a quick demo of the Storybook work that we've had in progress. We recently, Milan added this really cool Sandbox, which is pretty awesome. So we wanted to show folks.
Sounds good. Thank you, Wayne. Let me just share my screen. I think you need to stop sharing, Wayne. Thank you.
You're right.
All right. So can you guys see my screen? Excellent. So yeah, we put a lot of effort in Storybook, adding Storybook to our project. And in previous community meetings, we covered how we use Storybook for documentation. So I will skip that part, but today I just want to show the different aspect of using Storybook, which is mostly oriented towards modeling, testing different components, prototyping, and so on. So what we did is we added this Sandbox component inside the Storybooks, where you can virtually put in any JSON and play with it, see how it works, and use that as a prototyping. So in this case, I virtually went in one of the pages, or the overview page from one of my clusters. I went and copied the JSON definition for that, and I pasted it down here, and this is what showed up. And it's really easy to play with that and change things and see how the views respond. And this is all thanks to the model we have internally. Basically, the way we render every page is based on this JSON stream that comes from the backend to front end, and that JSON stream defines every single component you see on this page. So, you know, for somebody who is trying to see how this works or trying to prototype new pages, it should be easy. So for example, if I go here, I should be able just to start typing and see that should change this column. I can just say, let's see how long this is. And, you know, doing things like that, there's a little bit of lag. You see, this is making sure it's not too long. So this is basically how we plan to do some prototyping modeling. So this will enable Octant to be much easier used inside the other projects to build your own either pages or plugins. So to start with, the only thing you need to do is get in your browser, get to networking tab, grab your JSON from here and paste it down here. That should do it, right? Looks like I actually had some mistake. This is red. I don't know what I did. But the general idea is just to, you know, have a playground where you can test the different things before they are used in actual code.
Yeah, this is awesome. One of the things that I'm really excited about is when I want to add a new component, like it was pretty easy to write a story for a new component before and add it, but now I can just go and I can get things set up, and I can just use the Sandbox to prototype it quickly and make sure the layout's how I want, and make sure that all the things are there, and then I can convert it into its own story and add it as a component and all of that. So this is really nice for plugin layouts and things like that too. So thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's I think actually it's a great demonstration how good the Octant data model is. You know, you can just easily go here and do you know, play with it and test different components too. Cool. Any comments, questions?
I'd also like to make a comment. It's probably for this reason that plugins don't actually have to be written in Go, right? So hypothetically, if you're writing Python and you can somehow generate this JSON, you could still theoretically come up with this layout.
Yeah. So basically any language that can write out JSON can be used for plugins. And support gRPC, which most frameworks do nowadays. So.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, that's it on the agenda today. Are there any more questions or things people want to add, or something people were expecting to see that they didn't get a chance to see? All right, well, thank you everyone, and we will see you all next week.